So, Avery, it's really good to see you again, and that you have a question about, and so it's actually interesting topic. And I'll start off with that long time ago, vegetarianism, because of Hinduism, vegetarianism started to become a thing back in the 1970s.
Hmm.
People in Thailand then went to Bhikkhu Buddhadasa to confront him on that. And his answer was, I eat food, that food is food. And that we see that a lot of people get into um, vegetarianism and vegan foods, and they want justification for themselves being in it and doing it. And so that means that they want other people to do it. Just like in Christianity, the Christians want everybody to follow their rules. This is why abortion has become such an issue, is because so many people, most of the people, don't want to follow the rule. Even Christians don't follow the rule. And even there is no such in the Bible, but people like to have rules. And so veganism and vegetarianism now has become a new system of rules. And thou shalt do what I tell you to do, and I tell you to do it because I think it's supposed to be good, but I'm not quite sure. But if I can make everybody do it,
That's basically
then,
every diet.
mhm. And look how many different diets there are on the market. Um, Diets for weight loss, diets for this, that, and the other thing, and that they a lot of it has to do with not killing. The question is not killing what? Because anything that a human would eat, something has to die. Something has to die. That it's that kind of, let us say, this planet evolved in that direction so that uh, little worms are eaten by big worms, that lions will kill the cubs, that there is cannibalism in the natural world. And the whole idea in India, from in way back when, was, oh, we should not be killing big animals. Now, the Buddha himself was not against the killing of animals. He didn't go around making rules for the society, but rather he ate whatever was available. And that the old tradition is still very quite true in Thailand of when the monks go out of Bendabat, depends upon what neighborhood they live in, but primarily they get fed what was left over from supper last night. And so whatever the people will give the monks, that's what they got. That in fact, Achan Po uh, would take me out and a few others on Bendabat, and he intentionally went to the poorer neighborhoods. And that meant that sometimes a half a banana or a half of a little fish would show up in the bowl because it was the stuff that was left over from the meals. And that this was actually quite a lesson for me. Took me a long time to learn it because my attitude was is that, hey, I should be supporting these people rather than them supporting me. But then I began to understand the issues about generosity and gratitude. And I, instead of having my nose up in the air of, oh, I can eat better than this, into the position of that I'm grateful for these people, that even though they don't have much, they're willing to share it.
Hmm.
And so this group of people that went to Bhikkhu Buddhadasa about the veganism and vegetarianism, he said to them, I only eat food, which means that he's not making those kind of distinctions. And that we, when we choose our diet, we don't make those kind of distinctions. Now, one of the things that I have noticed over my lifetime is that I stopped caring about what I ate. And that actually becomes a kind of a humorous issue in the dialogue. Well, what do you want? Well, I don't know. I'm not thinking about food. What have you got? And the answer to that is we got all kinds of things. What do you want? And we are taught in our society from childhood to be choosy about food. That we're choosy naturally in the sense of that we want to eat what we know rather than trying something new. And also there's issues about some things taste differently and we're not used to them. There's a term for that called an acquired taste. And another thing that happens with children is that the parents won't let the children eat what they want to eat. Instead, they'll tell the child, oh, you've got to eat your broccoli and then you can have dessert.
Mm-hmm.
And so we get all of these rules involved with what we are supposed to eat. And when the rules go really badly, people wind up being vegan or having a particular kind of diet. And then they look down on other people for not following that diet in the sense of like killing. Except that people who are on these vegan diets will often eat nuts, and that the production of these nuts, almonds, avocados, those kind of things require an awful lot of work, an awful lot of water, an awful lot of resources that the vegans are insisting that they have a particular diet and that they're actually causing more harm in the environment by being picky. And that it would be better if they would just kind of eat naturally and anything will do. That this is the way that it's best understood, is that we cause trouble by trying to figure out what's the best thing that I'm supposed to eat. And there's an awful lot of different diets, and there's an awful lot of research, and saying, oh, this food is bad. There will be articles about the 10 things that cause liver cancer, or kidney problems are caused by a particular food, or whatever like that. Or you should be getting vitamin D. You got to take vitamin supplements because your diet is not good enough, right? So there's a lot of worry that we don't need to go into. That in fact, a much better thing to do would be have the right attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And the right attitude is I'm healthy regardless of what I eat. And I can be mindful and watch what I'm eating and see what effects it has. One of the things, in fact, about medications and supplements and the pill form of medications is people will take it because they're told to. They take it because they saw an ad. They take it because the doctor gave them a prescription. And then they're not paying attention to what value that medicine has. And so if you are taking medicine, the right thing to do with it is to check things out. What's the effect of that medicine? Does it actually work? And the same thing is true about the food that we eat. Some foods have an effect, and it's good to have the information about the foods, but don't make the information about foods into a rule of, oh, you should only eat this particular kind of food, but rather having a wide variety. So a wide variety of foods is probably the best healthy, but don't make that into a rule that you have to have a wide variety, that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the variety is limited for a particular period of time. But the point is that how do we feel about
Yeah,
what we eat?
the actual reason I brought this up is because I started experimenting with it a lot, and I found that something that kind of helps me focus and stay calm is usually just a salad with maybe some chickpeas or like something like that. And I thought that that was kind of interesting.
Hmm. Paying attention to what we eat and the effects that it has on us is the better way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, is part of the Eightfold Noble Path, is to remember to look at what value a particular food or a particular medication will have, what's the thing that's going on with it, because then we have better choices. An example of that was is that my mother heard many, many years ago, long before it became common knowledge, that aspirin was good. And so she started taking aspirin every day. She wound up taking 4 of the big tablets, the 300 milligram tablets, not the 80 milligram baby aspirin. And that caused acid. And so she was constantly spitting up, but she kept taking the aspirin because she had gotten into the habit of it, thinking that it was the right thing to do.
Well,
That in fact I remember the original research was is that it was about heart conditions, and that they did a vast experiment, a vast double-blind control, and that the people who were in the control were ones that had particular trouble with particular diseases of the heart and cardiovascular, and that the aspirin is a little bit of a blood thinner, not real heavy duty blood thinner, but it does have the quality of thinning the blood. And because of that, they stopped the experiment and put everybody that was in the control group on aspirin. And
hmm.
this got to be great big news. But years later, they revised that and decided that taking aspirin is not such a big deal. So you don't hear about it nearly the way that it was happening in the 1960s and 70s. That research is often done in a fad, that we get this kind of information and we say, oh, because of this information, this thing is really good, therefore everybody should be taking this. And then later they find out, well, wait a minute, we were wrong about that. And so we stop pushing, say, aspirin, or we stop pushing certain drugs. Another example was multivitamins. Multivitamins were a huge deal back in the 70s. But now, I think partly because of advertising. It was a new product on the market, and everybody is supposed to have multivitamins. But now, there's not much to it. Some people take multivitamins, most people don't. Those who do, it's not a regular thing.
Mm-hmm.
But at one time, that was a rule that, in fact, even schools would force the parents to put the kids on multivitamins. Right? So
Hmm.
the problem with food is our ideas about looking for the best thing and trying to make everybody do what we're doing. That even happens, by the way, with alcohol. The people who drink want everybody to drink. And so they get into cliques so that if you're drinking alcohol and drinking a lot, you will wind up associating with people who drink a lot. This is one of the points about coming out of drinking alcohol, and it's especially true with the AA, the Alcoholics Anonymous, is to teach people to stay away from your old friends. Go make some new friends who don't drink. If you drink and want to quit, then stop associating with all of your old friends who drink and want you to drink too.
Hmm.
Hmm. And so this,
I've been
go
thinking
ahead.
like that reminds me of how you talk about having noble friends. And at first I thought it was kind of silly, but the more time goes on, the more I realize, well, a lot of my friends don't really have any interest in this kind of stuff. Like a lot of the people I see at my school, roommates, etc. So I've kind of been trying to get in touch with more people who are from the Sangha. And I've had some good conversations with them too, so that's good.
Yes, yes. I highly recommend being around other noble people, people who are nobly minded, those who are interested in stopping all of their problems. And yet, here we are talking about food, and so many people wind up making food a problem.
Hmm.
Like the vegetarians, and in fact, the story that I heard about it was is that it was a whole busload of people who came from Bangkok all the way down to Suwan Mok to confront Bhikkhu Buddhadasa because he was not a vegetarian. I think, in fact, that happened because it was during those years in the 1970s where vegetarianism became a fad. And the fad was is that everybody should be a vegetarian, not recognizing that a wide variety of food is a whole lot easier. And if you are limited in the kind of food that you have available, then why make rules about, oh, this food that is available is not good enough? Let's go ahead and have fun and eat what is available. And so let's not make trouble. Let's not make any problems about food, but rather let's be mindful of what the food does for each individual person
Hmm.
and make it easy. That's the way to look is that let's make food not an issue, not a problem.
Makes sense, yeah. One other thing, this is off topic, so if I'm stealing your thunder, let me know. You okay with switching topics?
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead and ask the question.
All right. Um, it's sort of like it's kind of hard for me to stay in the right mindset in the environment that I live in right now, and I can't really change it. But I don't know. I find myself wanting more and more often to just kind of live somewhere that's a lot quieter, and then hmm, sorry, overthinking it, but yeah.
Well,
There's like some things that I can control about my environment. Like if I wanted to, I could clean up my room or maybe turn off the light, whatever. But then there's a lot of things I can't control about where I live, which I think if I could choose everything, I would kind of just prefer to live in a place that's uh I guess tropical and usually sunny and close to like a forest or lake or something like that. But
hmm
I'm trying to
well,
practice wherever I go.
yes. Well, there's two issues about it,
Mhm.
and the two issues are inside and outside. that when you are in a particular physical environment on the outside, the environment that you're in does affect the mind, but you have control over your mind so that those things don't affect you much. For instance, if the neighbors are really noisy right now,
Mm-hmm.
we can take a walk. We don't have to go to confront them and try to fix them so that you're happy. Rather, we can leave. There's an old phrase that I picked up many, many years ago. Um, it is based upon the phrase, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Have you ever heard of that? All right.
It
There's
kind
a
of makes
second,
sense.
pardon?
It kind of makes sense. What does it mean
It,
exactly?
well, let's get into that after I finish it. Okay,
Sorry.
the thing, and that is when the going gets tough, the tough get going. But then there's the other one, when the going gets tough, the bard go drinking. And then the third one is when the going gets tough, the Buddha takes a hike. All right, so the
Mm-hmm.
going gets tough, the tough get going means that when things are difficult, we're supposed to fight it. We're supposed to get tough uh, because we don't like things.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be the fight. And then the flight would be when the going gets tough, the bard go drinking. But that's not a healthy way of taking flight. That a better way is when the going gets tough, the Buddha takes a hike. Now, we can take that hike in the physical environment. When the neighbors are noisy, you can open the door and go out on the street or go for a walk or whatever. But there's always also the possibility of taking the hike without leaving the room. And that is that we can become distracted. We can listen to something else. We can actually look inside and say, the house is noisy, the neighbors are noisy, but I'm okay. I can handle that. I'm strong enough to let them be noisy and I'm still happy. So we can divert our thought patterns from I don't like their noise into it don't bother me. I'm okay. I'm all
Mm-hmm.
right with that. Everything is okay. Everything is fine. And in that regard, every time and every moment is an opportunity to practice the Dhamma. There's a moment for everything. And so anytime that we get into a state of not liking because of something in our environment, we have the choice of either leaving it physically or leaving it mentally. But grumbling around because the neighbors are noisy is not recommended. Better to stop being so tough about the noise that we don't like.
Mm-hmm.
That you know that it's very common in America now that there is a certain kind of belligerence that's grown up in our environment now, so that the cops kill more people. That uh, there's even a word for it, a Karen. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the people who see you do something and then they don't like it and they come in and confront you. Don't park your car in front of my house.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing that is happening, and it happens frequently. That means then that the people create a tough situation in their mind. I don't like that guy parking in front of my house, and now I'm going to go be tough and take my baseball bat out and break his windows. And that I think that that's in fact been there to a lesser degree all along for centuries even. But now that we have cell phones and record things and it winds up on the internet, we can see just how violent humanity is, and it's becoming even more so. Violence in the politics, violence in the road rage, all that kind of when the tough gets going, when when then the tough people get tough, they get strong, they get angry. And if you have those kind of feelings, like I want to put a stop to what those people are doing, we can say, aha, I see that. I see that I'm getting a tough attitude.
Hmm.
And the easy way out is just ignore them or to take a hike where you don't have to deal with it. Now, the Buddha recommends both of those things. And the way that I would say it is that if you can't handle it yourself inside your own mind, then do something about it. And the Buddha gave four examples. One was as if there is an area that is having a famine, there's no food, a drought, or whatever like that, then
Hmm.
it's best for the monks to leave that area. If there is a war going on, if there are people being yelling and violent with each other, don't try to intervene with it. Take a hike instead. Go away. If there is pestilence, if people are sick, and there's a plague going on, the best thing to do is to get away from that, to go someplace else. Like for instance, Notre Dame, very famous, during the plague, he would stay in a tower. I've heard the same thing about Isaac Newton, that there was a plague going on when he was alive, and so he stayed kind of locked up and cloistered. He would stay away from it. So the same thing is true about alcohol. Stay away from people who are drinking.
Hmm.
Stay away from them. And so let's see, I've covered. And the last one would be a flood. That if there is a flood, that's a good reason for people to leave that area. And so the Buddha recommends that. Now, how we can handle that in the situation of, let us say, arguing with the wife or arguing with a friend, is that when you recognize that an argument is going on, we can either leave the argument
That's a
by
big one for
getting,
me, actually. I
yeah,
uh I don't engage in arguments much anymore because I kind of see how pointless most of them are.
oh, yes, nobody wins an argument. Everybody leaves an argument feeling bad.
Hmm.
Nobody gets any benefit. But in fact, there was back in the, let us say about 15 years ago, there was a lot of arguments going on between Christianity and the atheist. And the major argument was, does God exist? And the point was is that nobody got around to actually defining what the word God meant. So in some cases, the word God is used, and there's no such thing as that. But you can also use the word God in a different context, and of course it exists. That in fact, the environment you live in, the air you breathe, the ground that you walk on is your God, because you can't do a whole lot about it. That we live in the environment, that this is in Buddhism, is what we call the Dhammakai, the whole body of the Dhamma.
Is that like going with the flow then? Like,
Yes, That the flow is, in fact, that's a good definition of God. What's the flow? Like, for instance, there's a flood. Uh, if you're in the flood, you don't have much choice about which direction that you're going. I remember when I was a kid, by the way, I was at the river, and this guy wanted to swim to the other side, and he did, except that he wound up not going straight across the river to get from here to there where he wanted. He wound up getting on the other side about a mile down. He disappeared while he was still swimming. The current, he couldn't buck the current. He was swimming, yes, and he'd made it across the river, but he got a whole lot further down the river by the river rather than getting across the river by his own efforts.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is an understanding of that, yes, there are things that are well beyond our control.
Yep.
And that that's in a kind of a really big way. And so you can define God as that. But putting a personality, a name, dressing it up, putting a beard on it, that is not a really good idea. That Jesus would say that the kingdom of God, or the actually in the Greek, it's basilica, theos. And the basilica, you've heard the word basilica, that's like a great big cathedral. So it's a vast place. It's a palace or a garden or a paradise. And this basilica theos, this kingdom of God, actually is within us. It's part of our attitude. It's part of being alive. That when you breathe in, you're breathing in God. And when you breathe out, you're breathing out God. Everything around us is God, if we define it that way.
Hmm.
And so when people would say, I have a personal relationship with God, there's two possibilities. One is that they've got complicated thoughts about it, or number two, they're living well in their environment, living in our senses, being in the present moment. Because when we're in the present moment, we actually are in the presence of God. But there's
Nice.
no use to putting a personality on it, thinking that God takes care of me. Well, the environment that you're in does support you. Without the gravity, you'd fly up into the air. You go into outer space. Without the air to breathe, we would die. And so God does support us. But praying to God, saying, oh, I wish you had fixed my granny who's in the hospital, that's, let us say, wishful thinking. And is oftentimes ritualized so that people do a prayer. In my family, it was uh, always at the mealtime. God is great, God is good, and we thank Him for our food. But modern kids now will say McDonald's is great, McDonald's is good, and we thank McDonald's for our food. But, but McDonald's is part of God too.
Hmm.
Or Safeway is great, Safeway is good, and we thank Safeway for our food.
I think you mean Subway.
Pardon?
I think you mean Subway. Like the subs, the sandwich shop?
Oh, well, no, Safeway was a famous grocery store.
Oh, I
I
haven't been
don't
to
know
one.
if
I've
they're
been to
still.
Piggly Wiggly, I've been to Walgreens, I've been to Jewel Osco, but I haven't been to Safeway.
Well, then you don't have to thank Safeway for your food. But the point of that little rhyme would be to feel gratitude that we're alive, that we do have food to eat, that we do have
Gratitude,
nourishment.
gratitude and being in the present moment are like two things that I think are really, really good for kind of relaxing and get into a good mood. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
when I sit down to meditate, I try more and more to just stay in the breath and not really let any of the thoughts come up because we don't even control, like, we don't have full control over what we think about, which is, it really hit me when I was meditating earlier that, like, I was relaxing and kind of breathing, and then this one memory that I really didn't like came up, and I was like, but I didn't choose for that to happen. I didn't choose that at all, you know?
It just came up. kind of
Yeah.
like it's wild,
Yeah.
because we don't have any control over it. But one of the qualities that we have in our civilization is that we expect our children to have some training. Unfortunately, we don't do a very good job of training our children. And so when you were a child, you really didn't get any good mental training. The example of that would be a laptop with, say, Windows or Unix. If if you want to use the computer, you have to learn about Windows, and it takes some training. And the more training you have, the easier the PC is to use.
Hmm.
Okay, well, the mind is exactly that way too, except the mind is far more sophisticated than Windows. But it still needs to be examined, learned, and trained. And so, yes, those thoughts do come up. Basically, they come up out of our past. One
Yeah.
way of looking about it, thinking about it, is that very few people actually have original thoughts. Everybody has a few, and that inventors would have quite a lot of original thoughts, but it would still be less than 5 or 10%. That even for thinkers who dream up stuff, inventors will do that invention based upon the products that they already know about, things that they have learned. And so these random thoughts that we have are actually just in the storage bin, and we pull that thought out and we pull this thought out, and people think that these thoughts are brand new, that nobody's ever had that thought before, to where in fact, oh yes, they have, that this is probably an old thought. I've just forgotten where I'd gotten it from. And so now we can recognize that we have some control over which thoughts we're going to have. This is the training for anapanasati. This is the training of the mind, is that we have choices. And we have a choice about what we're going to think every moment, if we can remember that we have choices, that we can choose what we're going to do. We can choose what we're going to think.
It's weird though, because sometimes I think I might just not want to think at all. I might just want to say I'm tired of thinking. I just want to lie here and relax,
Uh-huh.
not do anything.
All right. Well, you can do that by kind of shutting a mental door. An example would be when you're home alone, I'm not going to think about school. Another one would be for a traveler. Let's say someone travels from England to Thailand, because in fact, this has happened. And I would recommend to that student, when you're in Thailand, don't think about England. Think about Thailand. If you're going to have thoughts, remember to not think about England. Okay?
Hmm.
So if you're home alone, don't think about school. Or for some people, don't think about the computer. Anything that has to do with the computer, no, I'm not going to think about that. And so we remember to. And then what? A minute later, we're thinking about the computer again.
Hmm.
But if we can remember, oh, I'm not going to think about that computer, I'm really glad that I caught it. And then we can be happy again.
Hmm.
And then thoughts about the computer will come back again. Well, that's all right. But if we then start shutting a lot of the doors, we can say, okay, I'm not going to think about school, and I'm not going to think about the computer, and I'm not going to think about another place or another time. I'm going to stay here and be in the senses. So let us say you're laying in bed,
Hmm.
getting ready to go to sleep. Stay in the present moment. Feel the pillow, feel the covers, feel the body. Do some breathing. Think about what's happening right now with the idea of, wow, this is nice. I don't have to think about the computer. I don't have to think about school. I don't have to think about that argument that I had with Aunt Susie. I
Mm-hmm.
can just lay here and pay attention to how nice it is. That's the way then of just having, that's all I'm going to think about is my breathing and my sensory input and how nice it is.
I might do
And
that
that's
really soon. I'm getting tired actually.
and that will be in the direction then of not having any thoughts at all. Because look how many doors you have closed. And pretty soon there's not much to think about anymore. And everything is okay and everything is happy and there's no dangers, there's no worries. And so we stop thinking. We put some gaps in those thoughts. And the way to
Exactly.
do that is to have a wholesome thought about what's happening right now, and then have another wholesome thought and another one, and pretty soon we can put some gaps in those wholesome thoughts. But if we're not being mindful, we'll get wrapped up into a particular topic about the computer. Oh, I got to do this and I got to do that and I got to do this other thing and how am I going to get that thing done and all of this kind of stuff. And now we're caught in a great big cycle of fury of thoughts. But if you can remember, oh, I'm not going to think about the computer right now. Not going to think about it. Not going to think about school. So we can put some limits in there.
I like this idea.
Mm-hmm. That in fact, I'm not going to think about food. If I'm not eating, why should I think about food? Let's think about food when we're actually eating. And when we are eating, let's think about food and not think about the computer. Put the cell phone down while we're eating
That's how you live in the moment.
and live in the present moment. Enjoy your food. Taste it. Mull it over in the mouth. Uh, uh, see yourself extracting the fluids and swallowing them and then continuing to chew the various pieces. And so being in the present moment is actually quite limiting to the number of thoughts that we have. But look what we could do. Look how many thoughts that we could have about school. Look how many thoughts we could have about YouTube, watching YouTube, playing with the computer, etc., like that, and that keeps the mind kind of busy.
Yeah. Well, thank you for just talking with me. I think we talked
Excellent.
about like 3 different things. Well, a lot of different things.
Well,
Sorry, I'm tired.
enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that you in the present moment to be happy and enjoy the present moment.
Thank
And
you. That's very. Thank you.
I would also recommend that you spend more time with nobles, like on Skype on our groups or on um, if you're going to websites, visit Watson temples on the website.
The Open
Well,
Sangha Foundation.
yeah, that would be one. Yeah, come enjoy. Have you actually looked around? I know that you've
I've poked around a little bit.
do
I
some
like.
posting, give some messages, upload a file or two. We've got all of those features in there. A lot of stuff to read. All of it mostly wholesome.
Thanks. I'll check it out.
All right, Avery. Really, really glad to see you again. I hope to see you often.
Have a great night. Or I guess it'd be morning. Goodbye.